Hello everyone, and welcome to another part of the Galaga SDL tutorial videos. And in this video we're going to finish up the rest of the diving patterns for the enemy. So we're going to add the butterfly diving patterns and also the boss diving pattern. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is to go to our enemy.h and add a couple of more functions. Well, just one more function first, which is the index of the enemy. So over here right underneath type, we'll add int index, and that will just be a getter for our m index. So now that we have this, we will also need to make the dive function app virtual so we can override it in the other classes. So this one will be virtual void, and this one will now take an int called type, and by default the type will be equal to 0. And that's pretty much all the changes that we need to do in enemy.h. Now in enemy.cpp, we'll go down to right underneath the type function implementation, and we'll do int enemy index, and that one will return m index. And over here in dive, we'll just add int type. And these are all the changes that we need to do in the enemy h and the enemy.cpp. We don't need to do any more changes in the formation, so that should be fine. And now we can move on to our butterfly.h. So the butterfly.h, we are going to do pretty much the same setup that we did here for the wasp class. So we will need our dive paths. So over here we will add a private section and have static std vector of std vectors of vector2s, and we'll call this one as dive paths, just like the other one. And we will also have a boolean in here. This boolean will be whether or not the butterfly dive is an escort dive with a boss, or if it's the butterfly by itself, because the escort dive has a different path than the normal dive for a butterfly. So we'll add a boolean called m escort. And these will be all the variables that we need for this class. So next up, we need to create our create dive paths function. So static void create dive paths. And finally, we need to override the dive function. So we will have void dive, and that will take the int type equals 0. And that will be it for our butterfly.h. So now we can go to our butterfly.cpp, and all the way at the top, pretty much the exact same thing that we did for wasp.cpp. We will have our std vector vector2 butterfly s dive paths. So that should be fine here, and then we will create our create dive paths function. So void butterfly create dive paths. And now that we have this function implemented, we will also all the way at the end implement our dive function. So we will have void butterfly dive int type, and that's pretty much all the functions that we need to implement. So now for butterfly, for the dive, what we want to do is say that if the type is 0, then it's not an escort. If the type is not 0, then it's an escort. So we can say m escort is equal to type not equal to 0. So it's an escort as long as the type is not equal to 0. And then we will do the enemy dive with the type. And that's pretty much all we need to do in here. Or actually, we don't even need to pass the type. We can just say enemy dive, because it will just do the normal enemy thing, which sets the parent to null and sets the state to dive and so on. So that should be it for our dive function. Now for our path, I don't want to go through the specific way or the process of building the whole path, so I'm just gonna list all the curves and then add the path right away. So let me go through this and copy over the paths that I have here. So int current path is gonna start out being 0, and then Bezier path pointer path is equal to a new Bezier path, and then path add curve, and then this one will be vector2. So I'll just write down all the paths that I have here: 0.0f, 0.0f, and then a vector2 of 0.0f and negative 45.0f, and then after that is a vector2 of negative 60.0f and negative 45.0f, and finally a vector2 of negative 60.0f and 0.0f. Now for the samples, we will do 15 samples for this one, and that will be it for the first curve. Now the second curve will be path add curve, vector2 of negative 60.0f and 0.0f, then a vector2 of, this one is negative 60.0f and 80.0f, and next up is a vector2 of 200.0f and 125.0f, and finally vector2 of 200.0f and 200.0f. So that will be our 4 points for this curve, and then the samples will be 15 for this one as well. Next up, so this one will be made out of 5 curves, this path. So add curve, vector2, and that one will be 200.0f and 200.0f, and then vector2 of 200.0f and 275.0, then 100, so a vector2 of 175.0 and 250.0, and finally a vector2 of 175.0 and 325.0. And then the number of samples will be 15 for this one as well. Then path add curve, vector2 of 175.0 and 325.0. Next up is a vector2 of 175.0 and 425.0, vector2 of 375.0 and 425.0, and then a vector2 of 375.0 and 525.0. And then for the samples, that will be 15. And the last path will be, the last curve will be, so path add curve, vector2 of 375.0. I need an F here and there. So 375.0 and 525.0. Then a vector2 of 375.0, so 375.0 and 575.0. A vector2 of 300.0 and 625.0. And finally, the last one is vector2 of 300.0 and 775.0. And for the samples, these will be 15 samples as well. So that will be it for one of the paths. So what we need to do is add a path to our dive paths and then sample our path. So we'll say sdive paths dot pushback and std vector of vector2s, and then path sample ampersand s dive paths at the current path. And then after that we will delete our path. So that will be it for the first path. Next up we will do current path is equal to 1, path is equal to a new Bezier path, and then we'll pretty much copy and paste what we have for these three. So the dive path, pushback, sample, and delete path. And then we'll copy all 5 of these. And what we're going to do is paste them right here, right after the path equals new Bezier path. And the only difference between this and this, since they're mirrored, is to just flip all the x values. So over here, that's 0, so that's fine. 0, negative 60 becomes 60, negative 60 becomes 60, 60, 60, negative 200, and negative 200, and then negative 200, negative 200, negative 175, negative 175, negative 175, negative 175, negative 375, negative 375, negative, 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 and negative. And these will be the 2 paths for the butterfly if it's not escorting a boss. So now we can test this out, but first what we need to do is to follow this path. So we're going to do the exact same thing that we did for the wasp.cpp. So if we open up wasp.cpp, all we need to do is copy everything inside the handle dive state, and we will just paste it in our handle dive state for the butterfly. So the only difference that we need in here is to say that so our current path is still m index modulus 2, but if m escort the current path plus equals 2. So if it's an escort path, we need, because we're going to add, oh, this one is a vector 2. So, and this one is a vector 2 as well. Vector 2 and vector 2. There we go. All right. I added an extra bracket here. Okay, that looks about right. So, because we have our first 2 paths here, so that's for a normal one, and then we're going to add 2 more for the mirrored escort paths. So, if we want the escort paths, we just need to skip 2 over. And that's why we are adding plus equals 2. So that will be it for our handle dive state. And then for the render dive state, we're going to go to wasp.cpp again, and then take everything over here. We don't need these last 3 lines, so we'll just not add them, but everything else, so we're rendering the texture and doing all the for loop, we'll just copy that and paste it right here. So it's exactly the same idea. And now what we want to do is to do the exact same thing that we did for the escort. So over here in the render dive state, say if m escort, what we want to do is the current path, set the current path plus equals 2. And that will be it for the butterflies. Now what we can do is add the logic to make the butterflies dive as well. So we will go to our level.cpp and go down to our handle enemy diving, and we're going to copy everything in here and paste it so that we have 2 copies of this. And now instead of V, we can say if B is pressed, we need to check if it's a butterfly, and we're gonna tell this butterfly to dive. So that's all we did, just copy this entire block and paste it here and say that if B is pressed, and the enemy is a butterfly and it's in a formation, make it dive. So let's try to run this and see how it goes. Okay, so we will spawn all our enemies first. There we go. And once they are in a locked formation, we can start pressing B. Oh, there it goes. Right, we did not create the paths. So what we need to do is to go to our playscreen.cpp, and over here where we're creating the wasp create dive paths, we need to do butterfly create dive paths, and that's what was crashing it. So now we can run it again and see if it works. So that was in our play screen constructor. So let's spawn all of the enemies, and then we can press B once the formation locks. And there we go. As you can see, it goes down there, but then it shouldn't come up from down here and go all the way up. So what we need to do is to teleport the butterfly back. So if it goes down here, it needs to teleport right where it was, where it should be in the formation, all the way up there. So what we need to do instead is go back to our butterfly.cpp while it's going towards the waypoint. So once it reaches the end waypoint, and that will be right here. So we can say if our M current waypoint is equal to the S dive paths at the current path dot size. So if we reach the end of the path, what we need to do is to set our position. So our position is going to be equal to a vector 2 of the world formation position dot x. So that will be our x value, and our y value needs to be a little bit off screen. So we can say 20.0f. Need another bracket here. There we go. So now once it finishes the path at the bottom of the screen, it's going to be teleported to the top of the screen and then fly down to where it should be in the formation. So let's run that and see how it goes. So let's spawn all the enemies again. There we go, and then we press B, so it should fly down and then be teleported all the way at the top again. So that seems to be working pretty well. So it goes down and then it flies back down to formation. So that's pretty much the dive, the normal dive for a butterfly. Now we need to set up the escort dive for the bosses. So it's going to be pretty much the exact same idea for the boss. What we'll do is to open up our boss.h and then open up our butterfly.h as well. So let's put that on the side here. And what we're going to do is add a private section, and we can copy the sdive paths because it's the exact same idea. And now for this one, we will add a different boolean, because a boss, an escort fly for a boss is just a normal dive. The special dive for the boss is the capture dive. So we can have a boolean and capture, because we're adding the booleans for the special dives. And the special dive for a butterfly is an escort dive. The special dive for a boss is a capture dive. So we're not going to be implementing the capture dive in this video. We're just going to be implementing the normal escort dive for the boss. So now that we have this here, we will also need to add the create dive paths. So we'll say static void create dive paths, And we will also override the div function. So void div int type equals 0. And these are all the changes we're going to need to make inside the boss.h. So now we can open our boss.cpp. And all the way at the top, so let's open up our butterfly.cpp. So all the way at the top, we will do the exact same thing that we did for this. So we'll say std vector of vector2. And then this one will be boss s div paths. And then we will create our static function. So void boss create div paths. And in here, we will do the exact same thing that we did for this one, but we'll create the div path for the boss instead. So we will do int current path is going to be equal to 0. Bezier path is equal to a new Bezier path. And then we will delete Bezier path pointer. And then at the end, we will delete path. So in between, we will do a path sample, and the sample will take an ampersand s div paths at the current path, just to get that out of the way. And then we'll do s div paths on top of that, dot pushback std vector vector2. So pretty much the same thing as here. And now we can create the div path. And for that, I also have these, and these ones are made out of 6 curves. So we will do path add curve vector2. So let's get rid of this for now. So just to make some more space. Okay, so vector2, this one starts at 0.0f and 0.0. Vector2 of 0.0 and negative 60.0. Vector2 of negative 90.0 and negative 60.0. And a vector2 of negative 90.0 and 0.0. For the samples, will be 15 samples. And that will be it for the first curve. Did I forget something here? Let's see. We have our vectors here. Interesting. I wonder why it's complaining. I probably forgot a bracket somewhere. Okay. Well, let's move on and then I'll figure it out in a sec. So path add curve. So this one will be 15 as well. And then we'll do vector2 of negative 90.0f and 0.0. Next up is going to be a vector2 of negative 90.0 and 60.0. And then vector2 of negative 100.0 and 275.0. And the last one will be a vector2 of negative 15.0 and 275.0. And that will be it for this part. I'm still wondering why it's doing this over here. Let's see. We have over here That's covered. That's covered. That's covered. And that's covered. That's very odd that it's complaining about this. Oh well. Okay, so next up is another path, and that will be add curve, and then this one will also be 15 samples, and then this one will be a vector2 of negative 15.0f, 275.0, and then vector2 of 85.0 and 275.0, and then a vector2 of 85.0 and 125.0, and the last one will be a vector2 of negative 15.0 and 125.0. And that will be it for the third part. So fourth one will be a path, add curve, vector2, or let's add the samples as well. So the third one will actually be 25 samples. And then for this one, it will be negative 15.0 and 125.0. There we go. And then a vector2 of, so that one I have negative 175.0 and 125.0. Then 0.0f, and which is a vector2, 0.0, and 450.0. Then the last one is a vector2 of 120.0 and 550.0. So that will be it for the fourth one. So two more to go. Path, add curve, and the samples for this one will be back to 15 again. And then this one will be a vector2 of 120.0 and 550.0. Then a vector2 of 160.0 and 450.0. Then a vector2 of 200.0 and 500.0. Then the last one is vector2 of 200.0 and 500.0. Okay, so the last curve will be add curve, and the number of samples for this one is just 1, and this one will be a vector2 of 200.0 and 500.0, and a vector2 of 200.0 and 540.0, then a vector2 of 200.0 and 810.0, and the last one is vector2 of 200.0 and 800.0. And that will be it for the entire path. I wonder why this is doing that. Let me cut this out. That can't be right. Okay, let's try to run it and see what's going on. Maybe IntelliSense is just freaking out. I guess not. Let's see, error list. Unresolved external for just dive. Okay, let's just implement dive. So all the way at the end, we'll do the exact same thing that we did for the butterfly.cpp. So if we open up butterfly.cpp again, we'll go down to our dive, So as you can see, the escort is not equal to type, so we'll do the exact same thing with the capture. So void boss dive int type mCapture is going to be equal to type not equal to 0, and then we'll do the enemy dive function, and that will be it for our dive state. Okay, that seems to run. It's just, I guess IntelliSense was just freaking out for no reason, but that will be it for this curve. So the last thing that we need to do for this one is to just mirror that curve. So we'll just copy this and paste it. So we'll do the current path is equal to 1. The path is equal to a new Bezier path. And then we'll copy these 3 and paste them here again. So this setup is pretty much the same. And then we'll copy everything here and paste it in between, and go through and change all the x's to be the opposite sign. So that's negative, that's negative, that's negative. Remove that. The 85 will be negative instead. This one is positive, this one is positive, positive, and negative, and then negative, 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 and negative. And that will be all of them. So what we can do now is to try out a dive for the boss and see if it works. So we need to fill up pretty much the same thing that we have here. So we need to go to our butterfly.cpp, and what we need to do is to pretty much copy everything that we have in butterfly.cpp and go to boss.cpp and paste it in. So that was in everything in the handle dive state. We'll copy it and paste it into the handle dive state for the boss.cpp, but instead of mEscort it would be mCapture. So that's pretty much it for this part. And then for the rendering, we'll do the exact same thing. We will copy everything in the butterfly render dive state, and we will paste it in the render dive state of the boss. But instead of escort, we will do fCapture. And that will pretty much be it for this. So we'll go to our playscreen.cpp and say boss create dive paths. So that's in our play screen constructor, just like we did for the butterfly. And then we'll go to our level.cpp, copy this and paste it. And now we can say, instead of B, we can say something like H. If H is pressed and it's a boss, make the boss dive. So let's see what happens when we run this. So now when we press H, the boss should dive. When we press B, the butterfly should dive. And when we press V, the wasp should dive. So let's spawn all the enemies. There we go. And then if we press H, whoa, there's something wrong with the path. So this part seems to be working fine. So this part is fine, and then up to here. So this is the last bit. So let's see what we did wrong in there. Okay, so this is the last bit. So it's right here. And let me see the values that I have for this. So 120 and 450. Oh, okay. So this is not 550, this is 450 for the fifth path. So this is going to be 450, and then 160 and 450, then 200 and 500 and 250. Okay, so this should be 550. So since this is 450, this also needs to be 450. Okay, so it was this part right here. Instead of 550, this 450 for the fourth curve, and this one should be 450 as well, and then this one should be 550. And I think that should be it for those. So we can just copy these three and paste them down here, and then we will do the exact same thing we did before and switch all the signs for those, for the last three that we just replaced. Okay, so let's run it again and see what it looks like. So let's spawn all our enemies. There we go, and press H. Okay, there's still something off about this. So what is wrong with this one? So the last one, instead of 500, it needs to be 550 instead of that. Okay, so just that's the only thing that's off. So instead of 450, or instead of 500 for this, it needs to be 550. And this one will be 550 as well. So just the first point in the last curve. And let's see what that looks like. Oh, copying values is very hard. I just wanted to go through all the values that are there so that I didn't want to just copy and paste like a ton of values. It would be a lot harder to follow through with it. So that's why I wanted to just copy each value at a time so that you can copy along. And let's see what that looks like. And there we go. So that seems like the path that we need. And then it comes up, so it goes off screen, and then it comes up from the top once the path is done. So now that we have the bosses, the butterflies, and the wasps, well, wow. What's left is to make the two butterflies underneath the boss follow it along that dive path. So what we need to do is to use that same curve that we have for the boss for the butterfly as well. So what we can do is so inside our boss.cpp, we can copy everything here. So the current path, the new path up to delete path. So copy that and go to our butterfly.cpp, and all the way at the end of our function, paste it there. But the current path will be equal to 2. Our path is equal to a new path. So that's all we need to do. So we just added the new path here for it, and which is the boss's first path. And then we're going to copy the second path and paste it right underneath. But we're going to change the current path to 3. So that's path 2 and path 3 are the escort paths that are used by the boss. And that will be it for these changes. So all we need to do now is whenever a boss starts diving in an escort dive, we want the butterflies that are underneath it to join along with it. So in level.cpp, what we can do is, let's see here. We have it over here where the boss is diving. So right underneath here, we can say int index is equal to our enemies at I index. So that will give us the index of our boss. And int first escort index is going to be equal to index modulus 2 is equal to 0. So we're going to do a ternary operator here. Then it's going to be index times 2. Otherwise, it's going to be equal to index times 2 minus 1. And I'll explain why that's the case in a second. And then int second escort index is going to be equal to the first index, the first escort index plus 4. So these are the two indices for the two butterflies that we need to escort the boss. Then we can do for int j equals 0. J is less than m enemies dot size, and then j plus plus. There we go. And now we need to look for these two butterflies with these indices. So we can say if m enemies at j, type is enemy, type is equal to enemy butterfly. So if the current enemy is a butterfly, and m enemies at j, current state is equal to enemy formation. So if it's currently in the formation state, and we need one more thing that we need to check for. So and, but this one will be between brackets because we need to check for two things at once. We need to check that the enemy's index is either the first escort index or the second escort index. So that's why we need that between two brackets. So we'll say if m enemies at j index is equal to our first escort index, or m enemies at j index is equal to the second escort index. So if either of these is true and also these two are true, we want that enemy to dive, that butterfly to dive with the boss. So we can say m enemies at j dive, but dive will take 1, because dive 1, what it will do, it will force the butterfly to actually dive using the boss's dive path instead of their usual dive path. And that will pretty much be it for this part. So now we can run it and see how it goes. Let's spawn all our enemies. There we go, and let's try, and there we go. So when we try to make this boss dive, it takes these two with it, and then if we make this dive, it takes these two, and then this one will take this one, and it should be this one, but it's already diving with the other boss, and then this one will take that one, and there we go. Now we have the bosses diving, we also have the butterflies diving, and the wasps diving. So the only thing that's left is to make the butterflies and the wasps shoot at the player. So we need to implement the bullets for these enemies and the capturing for the boss, and that will be pretty much everything that we need in the formation state done. So to explain now why we are using the first escort index and the second escort index this way. That's because what we have is, for the bosses, we have our indices set up in a way where it's 0, 1, 2, and 3. And for the butterflies, so let's say these are our boss indices. For the butterflies, we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So as you can see, what we have here is that whenever it's even, the first one that's going to dive with the boss is going to be 2 times, or 2 times, if it's even, it's going to be 2 times the index. So if it's 0, 2 times 0 is 0. If it's 2, 2 times 2 is 4. So that's fine for an even number. For an odd number, it's the index times 2 minus 1. So 2 times 1 is 2, minus 1 is 1. 2 times 3 is 6, minus 1 is 5. So that gives us the first one that's going to be diving with the boss. And then the second one is pretty straightforward, is the first one plus 4. So the first one is 0, plus 4 is 4, 4 plus 4 is 8, 1 plus 4 is 5, and 5 plus 4 is 9. So that's why we're using that equation to find out the first and second escort. But that will be it for pretty much all the diving for the enemies. We have the bosses diving now, we have the butterflies diving, we have the wasps diving. So there are only a few more videos that we need to make to finish up the gameplay, and then add the collision in, and then the score screen. But we're almost there. Let me just try it one more time to make sure that everything is working correctly. So we have here, we can send the bosses to dive with 2 of the butterflies, and we can send our butterflies and wasps diving as well. Okay, so this will be it for this video. I really hope it helped, and if you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback, please leave them below. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.